Welcome back to another episode of Equitas Insights, a video series of conversations with industry leaders that provide an in-depth understanding on the relevant topics in the HR and recruitment industry. This month, we have the opportunity to speak with Reham Sati, who is the CEO and founder of Mavitai, on the main areas in the hiring process to watch out for bias and the different strategies or tools that can help combat this. With regards to bias in hiring, what impact do you think that this really has on hiring practices? I know a lot of different companies have different ways of how they're dealing with this issue at hand, but what's the main impact you think it has on a company's hiring practices?
Yeah, no, there's lots of positive impact of having a diverse and inclusive team, and there's a lot of research. I think McKinsey did a study that said, people who have diverse employees and invest in diversity and inclusion have an increased performance of sales by 35%, right? Tapping into these resources can really help scale an organization and make people feel included. And a lot of kind of research beyond that kind of shows that having that kind of creative forward thinking mentality and having teams that can think differently kind of just makes for a kind of a happier workforce as well, right? Because people from different backgrounds will be able to collaborate together, come up with new ideas, think differently, and that could lead in new products, new solutions, great customer success. And so my kind of conclusion to that is having a diverse and inclusive workforce not just impacts bottom line of the organization, but also can help an organization grow. It's a competitive advantage. And I've seen that time and time again, especially with clients that we work with, that they are able to scale completely differently and be able to grow as an organization by investing in this. And it's not just a tick box exercise. Everyone needs to be committed. Everyone from the recruiters all the way to kind of the CEO and all the employees in the organization. It needs to be built in within the foundation of that organization because it becomes core. And then they can start to then receive all the benefits that kind of come at the back of that. And that's why I was saying, bias training is a good starting point around creating that awareness piece and that communication. But there's more we can do, right? We're just scratching the surface, but we all need to invest in it. We all need to kind of be committed and make sure that it's not just a quota that we're just trying to reach. It's the foundation, and it pinpoints not just HR, but every division of an organization.
Yeah, no, 100% agree. I think it's also quite a learning process for a lot of people in the company, and I think every different sector in the organization has their own side of things. So I think it's really important, if they, like you said, they all need to be committed to it. It's not when people think of things as a problem or issue, they think, okay, let's just tackle an issue, and then once they've dealt with it, it's done. But it's some issues they have to deal with it at the root of the problem so that it doesn't resurface again, because you can't just put tissue paper and cover it and think that it's not going to come back out again. You really do need to really tackle it and make sure you get it at the root, the foundation of it, and make sure that you stay committed to obviously keep on tackling it, because like you said, it's not possible to eliminate every single biases out there. I mean, we are all human. That it is just the way we function, unfortunately. But at the same time, I do think that once a company, an organization has to stay committed to tackling that bias, tackling how they can continue to improve diversity and inclusion in the workplace. I mean, it's a process, really. It really is. So
100%. And I think, on that part of that process, organizations, just even a starting point, just measuring what their current workflow and their current employees, just making some sort of metrics to be able to understand what is the gender split in the organization, ethnicity split, what is the starting point, because you need to have some sort of benchmark, right, to start off with. Because otherwise, if you start adding tools and training, how do you measure the impact of that, right? Has that helped? Has it not? So it needs to be some sort of starting point to compare to see where the progress has been like, or what has it been like.
That's key, identifying how your progress is and how you can get to where you need to get to in the future. So that's interesting.
Exactly.
So obviously, what would you say now is starting at the very beginning, what would you say is the main causes for bias in hiring? Let's just say we start from the job description, screening part of things. Like, what are the main causes for bias in that side of things?
Okay, so the first point, if we start off with the job descriptions, one of the key areas where kind of biases can creep in is the terminology and the language, right? So the way job descriptions are written, how inclusive are they, right? Okay. A lot of job descriptions can be either too feminine or masculine in their language. And there's a really cool tool called Gender Decoder. It's an open source tool that organizations can put their job description, just copy paste it in. It'll tell you what the ratio of masculine versus feminine is. And what you want to do is try and make sure that it's a mixture. It's not too masculine, it's not too feminine, because you want to try and widen that talent pool. Yeah. But you don't want to screen people out because the way things are written. And writing, that you're an equal opportunity organization at the bottom is there's more to than just that. Yeah. And the language of how things are written on the job description has an impact. So that's one of the first areas I definitely say organizations should focus on. Okay. When they're doing that. The other section is when sourcing. If organizations are looking at like LinkedIn, or making sure that they're sourcing talent from as wide as net as possible. Yeah. Right. Looking at job boards that are different job boards that are targeting maybe potential different characteristics will help. Being able to not just look at someone's what university they went to or what company and shortlisting by that, but trying to make sure that it's as wide as possible. Yeah. Because the moment we see an image or a photo, right, of someone's LinkedIn profile, there was a study, in fact, that said about 300 milliseconds of seeing someone, you made a decision, right? Yeah. And so the first time you see a photo or of someone's profile, you kind of go, you're automatically made a choice, right? And so that's going to have an impact when you're kind of sourcing applicants. When you go down to the kind of screening process, I kind of mentioned around, the university name, the hobbies and interests, all of that can creep in where a lot of these kind of cognitive biases take place. Yeah. And so things like, blind recruiting could help with that. But also, how do you screen this talent? Because the other important bit is algorithmic bias. You want to try and mitigate for that as well. And so how do we make sure that algorithms that are being used to screen applicants, right, are not biased in that selection process? Yeah. A classic example was the 2015 Amazon case, where they used their past hiring data, about 10 years worth of hiring data that they used. And because it was more men were getting screened through the hiring process, historically, the machine did the same thing. And of course, they had to shut that down. But again, it's important when you're using technology, making sure that it's minimizing algorithmic biases, yeah, as well as cognitive biases. And then when you start going down to kind of interview process, making sure, that again, the first time you see someone, right, you're going to make some sort of judgment, right? Even on their voice or just what they dress like, etc. And so looking at, building that diverse panel of interviewees will help. Being able to use Equitas will help. And so it's there's different approaches, but it's what I probably say is measuring your diversity data throughout that process is key, because if we don't, then we won't really know how well we're doing and where we can improve on, right? If for example, applicants are getting, more applicants are applying, but they're not getting to interview, then there's something that's happening during the screening process. Mm-hmm. Or, if they're not applying in the first place, maybe looking at the job description. So data could be very powerful as long as it's cleansed data and, mitigating biases and stuff like that. But it can be very powerful to be able to measure and understand biases at every stage of that process.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's one of those things where, like you said, if you don't measure, you won't really understand the data, and you won't even understand where to begin, really. Like, you got to actually analyze and look at where really does the issue lie in, because it might be creeping up at every stage, but it might be one particular stage where it's very dominant in, and is not allowing things to progress. So 100% agree. I think companies need to do more researching and actually analyze and measure that data and see how they can actually make those improvements. So 100%.
Great. And it's not just a kind of a corporate thing. It's startups can do it, scale-ups can do it, and corporate can do it. It's not a money issue. It is just a time and a commitment that people put in. And just measuring your data, it shouldn't take too long, right? Especially if you're a startup, because you can lay the foundation. You've got the time to do it for when you scale. You're scaling with that in mind. Exactly. And so it's a real advantage for those type of organizations as well.
Absolutely. So obviously you've just sort of touched upon the strategies of tackling these biases in hiring. Are there any other sort of strategies or tools that you recommend for companies to help to combat this issue?
Yeah, so other things I'd recommend organizations do is, apart from the ones that I've already highlighted, is once you've hired candidates, right? It's more about retention now. Building a way for candidates or current employees to be able to openly communicate, right? Whether it be a budgeting system, a mentoring program, a way for people to feel like they're growing and there's a learning and development to that. It's going to be so important for, regardless of diversity and inclusion, it's just powerful to have that, especially for retaining talent. The other things that I've seen is, some organizations will have quotas as well, and policies. I've seen a lot of kind of policies that organizations are signing. And also charters. So there's the kind of the tech talent charter, for example, where even in organizations that have signed that charter to show that we are going to release, our diversity, metrics in tech. So that's another kind of approach that I'd recommend other organizations to kind of look into. On top of that, what's one I was going to say? Just completely skipped my mind. Can't remember now. But if it comes to me, I'll mention it. But there are, I would say hiring or screening for talent and candidates is one thing. Making sure you retain them is just as important. Because we've got to put the groundwork for that, and making sure that approaches, like I've just mentioned, are in that along the way in the process, and allowing organizations. I've seen focus groups, as I was going to say, focus groups and working groups that organizations will have, where they can discuss different agendas and feel like they can openly discuss them and make the only important bit I would say is that actions need to come at the back of those. Because you want to come away with actually there's change that's going to be made, and relaying back once those working groups or function groups have been created, relaying back to these employees what changes have been added, what actions have been created at the back of that, and what's the progress of it. Because we can talk and talk and talk, but as long as we want to see change, and we need to see the progress. By we, I mean the employees in the organization. And that's very important to be able to communicate that, because they know that they're being heard and they're being listened to, and that there's positive impact on the back of that.
Exactly. I think all employees just kind of want to see, like, the people at the top, the organization, just walk the talk, really. Just walk the talk.
Bit of that's highlight of this talk. Walk the talk. Walk the talk.
So what are the key takeaways from this episode? By investing in a diverse and inclusive workforce can help an organization to grow. It is not a tick box exercise. Every stakeholder in the organization, from the recruiters to the CEO, needs to be committed to this. It needs to be built from the foundation of that organization. Also, strategies such as focus groups and working groups can help an organization openly discuss different agendas. Actions then need to be taken into consideration to ensure there is progress, and then relay that progress to employees so they understand that change has been made. Thanks so much for watching. Stay tuned for the next episode in the series.